Welcome to today's episode of Commissioner's Corner. I'm your host, Allen County Commissioner Ron Turpin. If you have ever paid property taxes, you have worked with today's guest and her staff. My guest today is a friend who I consider to be a great public servant. She's our elected county treasurer, and over the course of the next hour, I will talk with County Treasurer Samantha Chenery and learn more about what her office does. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ron. Happy to be here.
So the first question I always ask our guest is the chance to get to know them a little better, how they got to where they're at. And you've had a fascinating journey to elected office. This is your first elected office, I believe.
It is.
So share some of your story with us.
So I was never somebody who thought that she would be in an elected position. Serving the public I've done for a while, but being an elected official was never something that was on my radar. I began public service when I worked for the city, and then I went to work for the county as a finance manager. And when I was in that department, at that position, I thought that was it for me. I was going to retire from there. I loved what I did. Then I got a call. The current treasurer at the time, Bill Royce, was looking for a new chief deputy and had enlisted the help of the auditor. And they reached out to me. They had gone through and looked at some of the different finance managers in Allen County and for whatever reason thought I would be a good fit. So Bill and I talked, and the job sounded amazing to me. It was exactly what I would want to do. I was very concerned about the fact of having to run for treasurer after, because that was just not something I saw myself doing. But, you know, I prayed on it. I talked to my family, and we decided the door opened, and the best thing to do was to walk through it. So here I am.
Yeah, it's always interesting. People, unless you've done it, most people don't know how stressful running a campaign can be.
Yes.
And especially in some of these local elected offices, most people have no clue what you do. So it's not only saying vote for me,
yes,
but it's also trying to explain what a role does. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah, it's a lot of educating voters.
Yeah. So walk us through a high-level overview of what the county treasurer does.
So high-level overview, what most people know our office for, good or bad, is that your property tax bills come from my office. It's my name on the envelope when you get that tax bill, so I become everyone's favorite person twice a year.
She says tongue-in-cheek.
Yes, absolutely. But that is what we're most known for, and that is a big portion of what we do. We not only send out the bills, but we collect all those payments. So we have a lot of different ways that we do that. But other things that our office does that a lot of people are unaware of is the treasurer is the chief investment officer for the county. So as the elected county treasurer, I'm the only one that can invest the county's money. And there's several different avenues and some restrictions on how I can do that. But essentially, that's one way that I can help benefit all the taxpayers and all the citizens in Allen County is by earning the highest interest and maximizing our money on that while still keeping it secure and liquid. Another thing that my office does is we essentially operate as a bank for the county. So all other county departments, when they take in payments, whether it's a fee or anything else, all of that then comes to my office for processing, and we manage all the bank accounts. I'm the custodian of all the county's money. So those are just, without going too far into the weeds, some of the things that we do.
Well, and we'll talk about some of these things in a little more depth, property taxes and your role in that, as well as some of the investments, the cash the county has on hand. So you talked a little bit about, how you got into this role, but what attracted you into finance in general?
I'm glutton for punishment, maybe.
Hey, I'm a finance guy too. Wait a minute. So.
I know. I got my undergrad in business, but I always navigated throughout my career, even in the private sector, towards positions that were financial in nature. I'm a numbers person. I like numbers because numbers don't lie. So that's kind of what drew me in there, and so I decided to get my master's in finance. And it's just the ability to look at finite numbers and make sense of it and benefit, whether it's a company, the taxpayers, whatever, and just really, I kind of geek out over it. I just kind of like that stuff.
So you've been with the city or the county for a while now. What attracted you to that versus the private sector?
When I was in private sector, I enjoyed it, but at the end of the day, I felt, not to sound corny, but I felt a higher calling. I was able to do things and generate bigger profits and organize finances for private companies. But I felt like my my skills, I guess you could say, would be better used to benefit the general public and the general good. So that's kind of what geared me towards wanting to get a job in the public sector. And once I did, I never looked back.
So do you see life being different as an elected official versus being someone who was the number two
Yes.
for a long time? You were the number two in the treasurer's office.
Yes.
So what are some of those differences?
Well, the buck stops with me. So, and I knew that going into it, but it is definitely a much higher level of responsibility. I like that though. I thrive on that. But there's a lot of decisions that have to be made on the daily. Some, high level decisions, some just regular, operational decisions. And as much as I thought that I knew everything I needed to know to take office, it was still very different once it was me, because I didn't have anyone to ask their opinion on, or, here's what I think we should do, but hey, you get to make the decision. No, now it's all on me. So,
well, and this is where what I have found is having relationships and alliances help. So
100%.
Like I know you're one of the people I talk to, and there are several others that if there's something that will affect more than just me. And my role is a little differently in that as the executive of the county, it's everybody. However, you and I talk about,
we do.
If there are things that affect your team, however, it also affects the public, we'll talk about, hey, what about this?
Finding a solution.
Yeah. And so I think there is a lot more of that goes on than people realize.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, case in point, whenever, I'm responsible for my office. I'm responsible for my staff and for my office. And a lot of people don't understand the structure. As a commissioner, it's probably a little bit different for you because you've got the departments that you guys manage, and then you've got the elected officials departments where we manage those ourselves. But there has to be that communication and the collaboration. I reach out to a lot of different departments about a lot of different things because we all kind of tie in together, and I think that's important.
It is. So what is the best part of the job?
I think for me, the best part of the job, honestly, is getting to interact with the public so much. You're always going to have incidences where someone's not happy with the response you give them. But I love engaging in those conversations. Even if I know that the answer that I'm going to give them is not what they want to hear, I like being able to have that conversation, explain things to people, educate people. I get to do a lot of that, especially when it comes to property tax. And I think that's probably my favorite part of it.
So would that be the most challenging part of the job, or what?
It is. It's the most rewarding and the most challenging, especially because, we're very limited on, especially things like penalties on property tax bills or things like that, removing those. We're mandated by state statute on when we can and can't do that. So diving into that with taxpayers and trying to explain it to them, and sometimes it's very difficult. I'll have people that have very extenuating circumstances, might be why they paid their property taxes late. But unfortunately, state statute only allows me to remove those if my office made a mistake. So I have to sometimes hear these stories that break my heart or that I know to be true, but I can't do anything about it. So it's just having those conversations. So
how do you, and we'll get into property taxes after our break, however, when people come to you, they're not probably the happiest, right?
No, not usually.
And a lot of people, shockingly so, and again, we'll talk about this as well, they come in person to pay. And so how do you and your team kind of diffuse what could be a heightened situation when someone's really honked off?
We talk a lot in my office about de-escalation. I work with my staff pretty lengthy with that. I have an amazing staff. Let me start there. Most of them are tenured and they've been there for a long time, and they know their jobs and they're good at what they do.
And you've got a small team, right?
I have a very small team. Even with my part-time person, myself and my chief deputy, we're only at 8 people. So we do a lot with a little. We rely a lot on technology. But that being said, my team is very good at de-escalating people, but we kind of have this practice that, if somebody is getting very upset, if somebody is getting, I don't want to say out of control, but just very emotional, then they will defer them to me. And then if they're in person or on the phone, then I will take over. And a lot of times, sometimes people just want to be heard, and they feel more heard when they get to talk to who they consider the top dog. So I'll just, talk to them and have that conversation with them. Very rarely do we get someone that is so upset that we can't calm them down. It has happened, but usually we can de-escalate the situation.
So what happens in those cases where you can't calm someone down?
I've had to have people removed from my office before, unfortunately. We do have security protocols in place, especially during tax time. We increase security because, we're dealing with tax, like you said, taxpayers coming in and paying. It's their money. I need to make sure I protect that and my staff. So on a few occasions, I have had to have security remove somebody from my office, or, put up warnings about somebody who's made threats to the office. It is very real. It does happen. Knock on wood, nothing worse has come of it yet.
Yeah.
So
well, and we have to remind people this is out of thousands of taxpayers
absolutely.
that you see every year.
Yes.
It's always just a handful of people that you hear about. However,
yes.
Those numbers are pretty low compared to all of the citizens that come through your doors.
Yes. Yeah.
With that, we will take our first commercial break. You're listening to Commissioner's Corner on WOWO. Welcome back to Commissioner's Corner. I'm your host, Allen County Commissioner Ron Turpin, and our guest today is Samantha Chenery, Allen County Treasurer. Welcome back, Sam.
Thank you.
So we talked a little bit about in the first segment about the job and what attracted you to that. I want to get into in this next segment some more of the details of some of the things that you do.
Okay.
And you had mentioned that probably what most people would know your office for is property taxes, right?
Yes.
When we get that lovely bill, at the first part of every year,
yes,
it's from you,
yep.
and it has a coupon for spring and fall, right?
Yep.
Then with the calculation. Can you walk us through, and we want to spend some time on this segment because most people don't know really how property taxes get calculated and the parts
sure.
of it. We had Stacey O'Day, the assessor, come in a few weeks ago and kind of walk through that. But there's really a role that the assessor has in it, there's a role the auditor has in it, and there's a role you have in it.
Yep.
So walk us through that role.
So right. It starts with the assessor. Your property taxes are driven off of your assessed value. So,
which is a Form 11, right?
Yes, the Form 11. That is correct. And I think that just came out not too long ago. And the other thing to remember is that in Indiana, property taxes are 1 year in arrears. So when I send you the bill that everybody got this year is for your property taxes from last year. And it's also based on that assessed value from last year.
Right. And the Form 11 is what they're projecting
for the next one.
Right. So you wouldn't see that. So what you got a week or two ago
yep.
From Form 11 isn't what you would see a tax bill from until next year.
Correct.
Right.
That is correct. Yep. And that alone gets a little confusing to some people. But so once we have the assessed value, then it kicks over to the auditor's office. They're the ones that are going to apply the different tax rates on there, separated up by district. There's a lot of formulas and calculations and all of that go into that. And again, it's still all based off of that assessed value. They're going to do your deductions and exemptions as well. That's a big thing. We get a lot of phone calls about those. All deductions and exemptions are run through the auditor's office. So once they say, okay, we've got this file, it's all done, it's been approved by the state, then it kicks over to me. So at that point, prior to that, it's about a 2 to 3 month process to get property tax bills out for my office. There's a lot of work we do. We use a third-party printer. It would be way too many bills to print in office. So we use a third-party printer, but we have to make sure that the form is exactly the way the state prescribed it. So we start working on those parts ahead of time. Once we get the data file from the auditor's office, that gets imported into our print file. Then we're doing test runs. So they will send us a batch of 50 that we're going to look at. And these are ones that are very specific in all different situations. So somebody who maybe doesn't own property tax or doesn't owe property tax but has a drain reconstruction they're paying for, or personal property taxes, mobile homes. So all the different scenarios that we can come up with, they're going to send that to us. We're going to review both the bill and the comparison statement, which is that second sheet, which I think is the most valuable thing that you get with your tax bill. And then once we verify that, then we print them in our office and make sure that they print the same way. Because, again, we do a lot of reprints in our office. Once that's all done, we set a mailing date, and our printer mails them off for us, and we wait for the phones to start ringing.
So we'll drill into that a little bit. So the assessor, their team, and Stacey, when she was here a few weeks ago, walked through what goes into the assessment process. Mm-hmm. So they come through, and the Form 11 comes out in late April or late May. And then from that, the resident gets that, mm-hmm. and then they have a time frame to either say, okay, I may not like it, but I agree with
accept
it,
it, yeah.
or I want to, contest it, which you have a timeline until like mid-June to do that.
Yes, it's mid-June. Yep.
So once that process is done, then in the middle of all that, local government has to go through and do their budgets for the next year. So our budget season actually kicks off over the summer, and it goes through usually like August, early September.
Yeah.
County council adopts a tax rate in October, and then when they do that, that is what the auditor uses to start, they take that as well as, all these other ancillary groups, right?
Yes,
Schools do theirs and all of those pieces. And then that's what goes to the state, as you said, that calculates an overall tax rate.
Yep.
And it's something that I think is important for people to see is, I think, because you're right, most people, when they get the bill from you, they focus on the bill.
Right.
My tax bill is X. Versus, and I agree with you, Sam, that looking at that comparison sheet is really the most important document that they're going to look at. Because we would really encourage you, when you're looking at that comparison sheet, it shows you not only what your assessed valuation was last year and this year, and what your tax rate was last year and this year, but it really shows you what that money's going to.
It does.
And that is a key piece, that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And really, when you want to look at and say, well, wait a minute, yes, your assessed valuation drives your taxes, but so does
the tax rates.
Exactly.
Yep.
And the tax rates could be, for example, does your school have a referendum that got approved last year? Is there, in the case of some parts of Allen County, do you now have a fire district?
Yep.
So those are the things that we would really encourage, you when you get that bill from the treasurer's office, really do a deep dive, because there's a lot of questions that get answered there that if you look at that first before you make that phone call to your team, because your team really can't answer those questions. They don't calculate the tax rates. They don't.
No, we don't calculate them. We can 99% of the time when someone's calling with questions like that, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to refer them to their comparison statement. In fact, most of the time when I'm talking to someone, that's what I pull up, because their question is usually, why did my taxes go up? Right. So I'm like, I don't know, but let's look at your comparison statement. So I'll pull it up. I'll try to get them to get their copy out as well. And then we walk through it. We look at the assessed value. We always start there. Make sure that they have their deductions and exemptions. That's always a biggie. And then that table 5 right there in the middle, that tells them exactly where every dollar went. The airport, the library, their school. And we can look and see, okay, well, last year you were at this rate, this year you're at this rate. And it really helps explain that, So that's the biggest tool that we use in our office.
Well, and something else, there's probably a lot of confusion this year about the legislature passed SEA 1, now 2 sessions ago. And this is kind of the first year that it really kind of kicked in. And for most residents, the only thing you're going to see initially is that $300 credit.
Right.
So did you get a lot of questions about that?
We got a lot of questions about that. The narrative initially, it seemed like, and this was something I was worried about talking to taxpayers last year once this bill went through, everybody had in their mind, my tax bill is going to be $300 less.
Right.
We always try to tell people that would only be the case if your assessed value did not change and your tax rates did not change. But people are hearing, I'm getting $300 off my tax bill. So when tax bills rolled out this year, we did get a lot of phone calls about that. And more times than not, it went back to the assessed value almost more than the tax rates. But we just had to explain to them, again, that's your initial platform that drives your property taxes. So, yes, you got your $300 credit, but your assessed value went up, $2,000, so then you're offsetting all of that. So there was a lot of confusion around that. Once we explained it to people and kind of walked through it, they were understanding. And we always just try to remind them, if it weren't for that $300, your bill would be more. So just trying to find the silver lining, I guess you could say.
Well, and that's one of the things that I think your team especially is kind of the point of the spear when it comes to property taxes, that the system will continue to get more confusing over the next several years as SEA 1 really kicks in. Because as it is now, instead of, to me, dealing with the assessed valuation system, which is kind of that to your point, that is the driver of all of this. And that's not an assessor issue. That is really constitutionally,
It's the process.
she has to do a market-based system.
Yep.
What residents are going to see is that $300 credit's there. However, over time, their homestead credit starts going away.
Right.
And instead, they're going to start seeing a credit that will come in place of that eventually will equal 2/3
Right.
of what your assessed valuation is. However, it's going to take years to get there. And so this is one that probably I think a lot of people don't understand.
They don't.
When they're told by elected officials, oh, hey, we have property tax reform, you're going to pay less in taxes.
Yep.
The first thing they assume is we're going to pay
less
less
in
in taxes.
Yes.
And however, because of the way the system is designed, until you, in my opinion, until you get to the base of the why, which is, I've said for a long time, to me, if you really want to reform this, what you do is, so Samantha goes and buys her house for $200,000. That to me should be the base of what my property taxes is.
Right.
And then it only goes up by the rate of inflation every year unless I do a major improvement to my home. And you can define what that is. But that's not the way assessed valuation works, right?
It's not, no.
Because we have, and ever since really COVID, there's been a shortage of housing. And when you look at the price point of housing has went up so dramatically.
Yes.
The average price of a new home in Allen County right now is $400,000 a year.
I believe it.
And that is out of the realm of a lot of people. So because of that, it's put a lot of pressure on housing prices. And so what that does is that affects your assessed valuation because housing prices go up, your assessed valuation goes up. And you may have paid $200,000 for your house, but it's assessed at $400,000 now. So even the system of credits and all that doesn't ultimately address what that is. So the challenge for you and your team is every year you're going to be hit with, well, wait a minute, so-and-so elected official promised me that my taxes would go down.
Yep.
However, because of the assessed valuation, and I was told a couple of weeks ago, they're looking at over 100 school systems are looking at referendums in the next few years.
So that was the other thing I was going to bring up. Yeah, what school district you're in definitely makes a big difference in your property taxes.
Right. So for the public, so all I have to say is, you and your team are prepared for a lot more questions in the future because you're the first person, when they open that bill from you, that's the first they actually, because, Stacy can send them an assessed valuation and says, my house went up 10%. Okay. But I don't know what that really impact is until they see your bill. So you're always going to be the first one that gets that.
Yep.
And what I hear you saying is your team's prepared for that.
We are. As the legislation with this SEA one, as it rolls out, we're having like mini training sessions within our office. As I go to conference and find out information, I share it with the staff. Unfortunately, a lot of times we don't get a lot of the full understanding of the impact until right before it happens. Because this statute went into play, but nobody really fully knows exactly what that's going to look like as it rolls out. So we're all still kind of just a hurry up and wait situation, but we'll get there.
Yeah. Well, I knew this segment would take us a while because this is one that, but it's the core of what people really care about. So we will take our next commercial break and then we'll pick it from there. You're listening to Commissioner's Corner on WOWO. Welcome back to Commissioner's Corner. I'm your host, Allen County Commissioner Ron Turpin, and my guest today is Samantha Chenery, Allen County Treasurer. So, Sam, and as we ended the last segment, we did a deep dive into property taxes and your team's role in it. I know one of the things that you and your team are constantly looking at is ways to streamline the collection process.
Yes.
So will you walk us through the ways that I can pay property taxes today, and what are some of the things you and your team are looking at to continue streamlining that?
Sure. This has been something that was very important to me when I took office. Obviously, I can't lessen the burden of anyone's property tax bill, but if I can at least make it a little bit easier for people to pay, I think that's one area that we can help with. So we have a very comprehensive online system. Through our online portal, you can do a one-time payment with an electronic check or a credit card. You can schedule a payment ahead of time. So let's say, you get your bill and you don't have to worry about it, but I don't know, maybe you don't get paid for a week or two. You can go in there, schedule it for when you get paid, and you're one and done. You don't have to worry about it. You can sign up for auto pay. So with that, whether it's with a electronic check or a credit card, it will automatically pull that property tax payment every 6 months on the due date. So set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about it. You can sign up for text reminders. So it will text you 30 days out if you haven't paid your property tax bill. If you still haven't paid 2 weeks out, it's going to send you another reminder. If you still haven't paid 3 days before, it's going to send you another reminder. And the nice thing about that is if you get that text, you can pay directly from that text. You hit a button and you just pay and you're done. So you can also sign up for e-billing online. There's a lot of different things. And for our landlords that own multiple properties, they can go in there and register their account. They can grab all 10, 20 properties that they have and put them all in their bucket, I guess you could say. And then from there on out, whenever they pay, all they have to do is log in and it's automatically going to grab all those properties. So that really helps a lot of our landlords because we have some landlords that have 50, 60, 70 properties, and that's a lot to keep track of. So that online portal is really nice. Obviously, people can come in the office and pay, and we do get a lot of people that do that. We do have 2 payment kiosks now. We've always had one that was right outside of our office, and that one takes cash or checks. We just finally got our new one. It is actually in the vestibule of the Rousseau Center. The nice thing about this is that it's 24/7 access. So you can access that kiosk anytime, day or night. If you work second shift or third shift, even before our offices are open, you can go into that kiosk and make your payment so you don't have to worry about it. People can also drop off payments across the street in the drop box over at the courts for child support. You can call and make a payment over the phone. We have tried to come up with as many different ways to allow people to make payment as we possibly can. One thing that we have been looking at, it's just not a smooth enough function for me to roll it out yet. At some point in the future, we would like to be able to offer it so that people can make their property tax payments at various retail locations across the county. Much like I think you can do that with several different types of utilities.
Yes, like city utilities, I think you can do that.
Yeah. So we are still working on that. The issue, we're working with the vendor on that. The issue that we're having is on a reconciliation on our side because we need to make sure if somebody's paying their property tax bill that we're getting the information that we need from that transaction to be able to apply it to their property. So that's where it gets a little bit different because people aren't necessarily always paying the address they live at. But that is something that we're looking at, something that I do hope to roll out in the future because I think that allows people to not have to come downtown. And we would have locations in all the neighborhoods in Allen County. So you'd be able to pay where you live versus having to, do it a different way. So that's the next thing we're working on.
So I know something that I hear from folks is, well, if I pay by e-check or if I pay by credit card, there's a fee for that.
Yes.
And so I think it's about $1 for the e-check, 95 cents, something like that.
Yep.
And then it's 2.9.
It's 2.95% for the card. Yep.
So why do we do that?
So that fee is not something that the county keeps. That is charged by the vendor that hosts our online platform. So the electronic check is cheaper because it is essentially processing your bank account as an ACH transaction. That is a lot less expensive to do on the back end. So that's where that fee is. Since we are a county office, we have to be completely transparent. So we can't absorb those fees because it wouldn't be fair to those that don't utilize that service to have to absorb the fees for that. The 2.95% is what the credit card processor charges. That's their fee to do that. And I always try to remind people, some people get upset about it, and I understand on a larger bill that can be a lot. Although we don't realize it, anytime we use our card, even if it's our debit card at the grocery store, we're paying that fee. It's just worked into the cost of the goods and services that we're paying for. That's all kind of calculated into that. We can't do that. We have to be completely transparent. So it's a per transaction basis in our office.
Yeah, one of the things as commissioner, I was kind of shocked when I did a road tour of all the different elected officials and spent time with you before you became treasurer and before I became commissioner. I was shocked the number of people that come in and pay cash.
Yes.
And, it could be for multiple properties. And, has that surprised you, the number of people that do that?
When I first started, it was very shocking to me. I think I've kind of gotten numb to it now. I've tried for many reasons, for security being one, both for the taxpayer and for our office.
And we do have security measures in place, by the way.
We do, yes, we absolutely do. But, I try to encourage people to pay online or whatever, but that we have a large population within the county that for whatever reason, whether it's they don't trust banking institutions or they just prefer to deal in cash. And so that cash comes to our office, and it is a pretty exuberant amount. I mean, when I talk to other treasurers across the state, I think we're either second or third in the amount of cash that we take in.
Yeah, it is. If you ever have been at Sam's office during tax season, it is. There's lines usually, and it's people that you think, oh, they're doing a check or whatever. No, most of them are cash.
They're paying in cash. Yep.
So, but taxes are not the only thing that you do. You mentioned earlier that you also administer the county's cash balance, and the numbers are significant.
Oh, yes.
And so, one of the things I know you give a report to the Board of Commissioners every year.
Yep. That
you kind of walk us through the cash the county has on hand in emergency funds and everything from the county, so that the public knows. We have a general fund which has about $150 million of the budget every year, but then we also have a bunch of ancillary funds as well.
Yes.
The courts, other things that we do.
Everything.
And that's almost another $150 million a year. And so that's not money we always have in cash. That certainly is budgets that money comes in, money comes out. However, there still is a sizable amount of money that's in the bank at any one point in time. And your job is to make sure that we get the highest interest rate possible while keeping the money safe for the taxpayer.
Yep.
So walk through that a little bit.
So there's a couple different avenues that we can do this in. It's always a fine balance. You want to, obviously some riskier things are going to have a higher interest rate of return. The biggest thing is making sure that the money is safe and that the money is liquid. And that is one thing that through the various avenues that we take for investments, I always make sure whatever financial institution I'm working with understands that, within a 24-hour notice, I may reach out to you and need to pull 50, 80, 100 million if it's disbursement time or whatever. So we have the money invested in some various bonds. We do have a CD now. We have money market accounts where, we're lucky because of the size that we are. We do have very good relationships with our local banks, and we are able to get a little bit better interest rates than probably the general population, simply because our balances can be so high at times. We also do something that's called an overnight repurchase agreement. So with our primary bank, we have a target amount that we keep in the bank daily, and then any money that comes in over that, it goes out just overnight, captures a much higher interest rate, and then the money comes back in. So that happens every single day, but it allows us to yield a higher interest rate. I was able to get us just under $17 million in interest profits last year.
And I think that's a sizable number, because that was my next question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Is that so? A lot of that was when the federal government did all the COVID money, right? We had a big bucket of cash all at once. Your team invested that, as well as other things in there. But that $17 million it allows us not to raise taxes,
right?
Because we have another revenue stream that we can do. And when you look at, if we go back to the property tax form that you look at, and you look at all the different rates that different units of government charge, the county actually is decreasing.
It is.
And it has been for a number of years. And part of that is because of the job that you and your team do, because interest rates have been fairly high.
Right.
We've been able to, really double the returns that we've had on the cash that we've had. And we've really tried to run county government very conservatively as far as from a spending perspective and a savings perspective. And that's allowed a lot of that return that you're talking about, which, when you give that report to the commissioners, it really is, this is money that we're able to operate the government off of and not have to raise that tax rate.
Right. Yeah. It's money that you hadn't accounted for. It's not budgeted for, but now it's extra money that can be worked into the formulation.
So, and with that, we will take our final commercial break. You're listening to Commissioner's Corner here on WOWO. Welcome back to Commissioner's Corner. I'm your host, Allen County Commissioner Ron Turpin, and my guest today is Allen County Treasurer Samantha Chenery. Welcome back, Sam, for our final segment.
Here we go.
So we've talked about the gamut. We've talked about property taxes, and we've talked about the cash balance. You are in your second year of a 4-year term. You and I have the same cycle, so we came into office together. How many terms are you allowed in your office?
I'm allowed to do 2 terms.
Yes, because it's a constitutional one.
Correct.
And therefore, the constitutional ones have a term limitation.
Yep.
So at this point, I'm going to assume you go for another term. So because you're an awesome treasurer.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That is the plan. So God willing, I will get to serve a second term.
So one of the things, and I'm going to pivot that into my next question, which is the legislature has had a number of conversations about different local elected offices. Indiana has, by volume, some of the most offices in the country. When you look at everything from townships all the way up to a state level office. And they've made several entrees about making a number of positions, such as yours, appointed rather than elected. So the thought pattern would be, if the legislature did it, they'd have to amend the Constitution.
Correct.
Which, the people have to vote on.
Right.
But if that happened, then the Board of Commissioners would appoint the treasurer versus it being elected. I've heard you talk to the public before that you think that's not the best idea.
Correct.
So can you give the audience some of your thoughts on that and why you think that's the case?
Sure. Right out of the gate, for me, the separation of duties becomes muddied at that point, I believe, if it's an appointed position. With the treasurer being the custodian of the county's money, managing all of the bank accounts, doing all of the investments, you want that to be someone that the citizens of the county have elected to be in that position. If that was an appointed position, and not to say that any of our current commissioners would do this, but the thought process behind it is you don't want somebody's friend to get appointed into a position, and then there's for lack of a better term, backdoor things happening, conversations happening that shouldn't. It needs to be an independent office so that separation of duties maintains a high level of integrity.
So how do you ensure, because this is one that frankly I'm agnostic on. I mean, I understand both sides of it.
Sure.
Because I understand your side, and I also understand that we are very fortunate right now to have very qualified people in office.
Yeah.
That's not always been the case. And for a number of our listeners that may live in other areas, that may not be the case for them.
Correct.
So how do we ensure quality, that we have a treasurer that understands finance, and that we have a surveyor that actually, Mike Frucci does a great job.
Fantastic job.
So how do we do that?
I think that's the biggest conundrum that we face in this decision in this argument on both sides. I think a lot of it is we need to make being an elected official, I guess you could say, more appealing. Obviously, you have to get into politics a little bit to do it. But if we know somebody who has that background, somebody who is, has the leadership, we want to encourage those people to get involved with politics and encourage people to run for office. I think having good working relationships, the elected official department heads and the commissioners, I think that helps too. A lot of times people don't want to get into elected positions because they don't want to deal with what they consider to be the drama, right? But if we have good relationships and the departments are working well together, I think it's a lot easier to encourage those people as well. Obviously other things, benefits, pay, things like that. But at the end of the day, you don't do this for the money. I know most people don't believe that, but we really aren't doing it for the money. We're doing it because this is where our heart is. So I think just trying to have the best structure, both internally and externally, that we can will help attract the right people.
Well, and I do think, and I agree, I also think that roles like yours and some of these other constitutional offices don't really, they're more of an administrator than they are, so you're not dealing with some of the public things that I am,
Correct.
Whether it's, solar fields or quarries or casinos.
No, that you can have that.
Yeah. So, because that is one that the hardest thing is people start attacking you and start, questioning your motives, and they have no idea who you are. They have no idea about fact patterns, but it's very easy in this age of social media to throw things out there. You're insulated a little bit from that. However, there still are,
except during tax time.
there are pieces out there, and remember that running for office is not easy.
It's not.
It is something that certainly I've learned a lot. I know you have too, and we've talked about these, and especially a county the size of this one.
Yes.
The campaign looks very different.
It does.
Than it does. For example, if you are doing a general election and you're doing a mailer. It's probably $15,000 to do
easy.
one mailer.
Yes.
And it is, so it's one that, fundraising is a whole different ball game. And it's, a lot of times I want to be the treasurer. I want to serve people.
Right. Yes.
I don't want to have to run a campaign.
I agree.
But,
yes. Yes.
But those are some of the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been involved in a number of county efforts. So what do you think the future of Allen County looks like?
I think we're very blessed to live in Allen County. I think we have good leadership, and I think we've been growing, and I think there's more opportunity for growth. I think with open communication and leaders that engage the public like we have, I think Allen County's future looks bright. I hear a lot of people, a lot of even younger people wanting to come here. They're coming back here after college. Those kind of things are encouraging.
So what do you think our biggest challenge is?
Honestly, I think it's lack of communication. I think a lot of times the narrative on different situations gets muddied. It's almost like a game of telephone. Everybody's whispering in everybody's ears. I think with our elected officials, and I have noticed more of this, being more open and receiving to having those conversations with the general public, answering those questions directly, I think that'll help a lot.
So part of that you talked about is social media, right?
Oh,
social
yeah.
media can be a great source of information. It can also be a great source of misinformation.
100%.
So how do you handle reading things about either you or your team that aren't accurate?
Honestly, 99% of the time, we don't respond to those. A lot of times I've learned throughout the years, and especially through campaigning and politics, more times than not, engaging in those conversations, nobody wins, right? And it's real easy to let emotions get the best of you. If it's something directly on our treasurer's Facebook page or whatever, many times I will correct misinformation, but then I'll stop it there if need be. As they say, there's online trolls, and people have their opinions, and I'm happy to have a conversation with somebody face to face or even over the telephone. I just feel like online it's too easy for things to get misconstrued.
Yeah, it is. Well, and you get a rabbit hole that you go down.
You do.
Right? And it's one that typically, especially if I don't know you and you make a comment on social media, I'm not going to respond.
Yeah, it's just not worth engaging in.
Yeah, and there's an unfortunateness in that. But as I tell people, I think I'm pretty engaged.
Absolutely.
And I've done, last year I did over 200 public meetings, visits, things like that, and I'm on track to do the same number this year. And so I'll go anywhere, and I know you will too. You will talk to anybody.
I will.
And so it's one that, if you got questions, just call us.
Just call us.
Yeah. Social media is not the best way to kind of get an answer for that, is it?
No, I think it's easier for people to air their grievances in a non-professional, non-polite way online because they're hiding behind a screen, So you always have to remember that when somebody kind of goes off on one of their tirades online, is that it's easier for them to do it that way. But if they're really concerned about it, they'll come to me and have a conversation.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on this a little bit ago, is that it's very easy as elected officials. We have, 30 different departments in Allen County. A number of them are elected. So, I can't tell you or your team what to do.
Right.
You run your staff just like I run mine. Mm-hmm. When I came commissioner, I saw that a lot of times we work in silos and we don't always collaborate as well as we should. Do you see ways that we can do a better job of this?
Yes and no. There's always room for improvement, right? I will say over the years, from the time that I started in the treasurer's office to now, I think that communication has improved. Now, whether that's a change in elected officials, various things, I'm sure. I think the realization that we all need to work together, regardless of the fact that you're not my boss, obviously, and I'm not your boss, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a collaboration needed there. So I think, I know right now, the county has quarterly meetings with all the department heads. Honestly, something I've said for a while is I think all just the elected officials getting together with the commissioners would be beneficial because our offices do function a little bit different than that of a regular county department, So I think getting in the same room, and even if it's quarterly, even if it's biannually, just getting in the same room and talking about, okay, these are the things that we're having issues with. Maybe these are the things you guys are seeing, and that common collaboration is always a good thing.
Well, as it is every week, an hour always goes by really fast. Samantha, thank you so much for being with us today and the service that you give to the people of Allen County. I know you're passionate about it, and it shows. So for those of you listening with us today, we want to thank you for joining us. We are thankful for your support. We hope you found this last hour to be valuable and that you learned something new. This is Allen County Commissioner Ron Turpin, and you have been listening to Commissioner's Corner on WOWO.